Meeting would probably be better.
Shorter. I
My
kid.
wife always reminds me, there is not a positive definition of the word verbose.
Nope.
Tells me that on a regular basis.
Oh my
Think she's trying to
gosh.
hit us something.
Right. Okay, are we good? Good evening. Welcome to our city council meeting this evening for Wednesday, May 10th. We apologize for the late start. Our last meeting was fun. Went over a little bit, so we will begin tonight with a Pledge of Allegiance by Marcus Johnson. Yeah.
If the audience will, well, good job. You're already there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Marcus. We'll move on to city council comments and recognitions. First, I will note that Councilmember Hodges is out of the country, so we'll excuse him tonight. Councilmember Orn haven't heard from her. She's at water board meeting. She had a public hearing tonight, so she's trying to get here as soon as she can. So we'll excuse her until she can make it. The city council comments and recognitions. Jared, Steve, anything?
Well, last year the Harriman's High soccer team was 18th going into playoffs and won it all. This year they're 20th, so maybe they'll do it again.
Saying there's a chance.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of give a word of thanks and applause to all those associated from Friends of Harriman with the Dowdle puzzle reveal on Saturday. What a cool event for the whole community. Just an awesome artwork, cool puzzle, nice vibe. Just for their first event like that, I think they did an outstanding job. And we're excited for Friends of Harriman, what the future holds for them. If you guys haven't got it, go get your Dowdle puzzle. All the proceeds from the sale of the puzzle go directly to Friends of Harriman. So go out and support them if you can. But that's it. Thanks. Great job, everyone.
Do we have that plaque? I forgot that plaque. It's on. I know where it is. Can you grab that? Sorry, it just dawned on me now. I was going to go get it between, but since we went over, I'm going to stall for a minute because Nathan's grabbing a plaque. I will make the comment now because I'll forget about it the next time. I've been attending the Citizens Police Academy, and then we also attended as a council a special by invite to an active shooter drill. Just hats off to our first responders in this community. Hopefully that's a training we'll never have to use. But watching it the 1 week was already emotional, and then going into it and having to play the different roles the next week was, and I don't mean this, I mean it's not hyperbole, but it's life-changing, understanding that situation. My heart rate didn't go up as much this time as it did at the VR thing, but it was, I didn't get any flags, but it was, thank you. While I'm opening this, I attended Friday, a few weeks ago, if you guys remember, we had the ESGR group here to, they invited a couple of us on that boss flight in the KC-135. I was invited to attend the actual awards banquet on Friday night. My wife and I attended, and I'll hold this up, and we're gonna present this to the police department tonight. I want this to be, because I think this really goes to our HR for sure too, but a lot of it comes from our police department. So I'll hold this up, this was a pretty cool plaque that we received as a city for our support of our guardmen and reservists that are out serving. It was fun for that. They told a few stories about, especially like I said, our police department and how when they had a reservist serving, and Chief, you can jump in if I'm saying anything incorrect. He was out serving, his wife was pregnant. Our department stepped up and checked on him, on her, made sure she was taken care of. There was a storm that came through, did some damage to the property. Our officers spent time there cleaning up the property, just really watched out for the family while they were gone, and that just still resonated with everybody at the banquet. That's just how our police department especially is family with each other, and they watch out for those, the families of those that are serving, and we support those that are serving, take away time from their normal jobs to serve our country. So again, so we'll present that to you after. We don't need to do anything official right now. We kind of did that, but again, thank you for what you guys do, for how you support the reservists, and to our staff and human resources from, I just kept hearing just praise from city top to bottom for what we did. We did not, they did also let me know we did not qualify for the top 30 across the, but they said we were like 75th out of, there's like 500 people that are nominated. So as a city, I think we came in like 75th, I think they said, for the national level. So hats off still, that's still quite the accomplishment and quite the honor. So, so just wanted to present that tonight. So, okay, we'll move on to item 5, public comment. Audience members may bring in any item to the city council's attention. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes. State law prohibits the council from acting on items that do not appear on the agenda. Public comments for this meeting will also be conducted electronically. Any person interested in addressing the council may submit a comment by emailing recorder@harriman.org or by visiting harriman.org/agendas and minutes, where there's a link to fill out an online public comment form. Your statement will be incorporated into the public record. So I don't have any forms, but I'm sure there are probably a couple people to speak tonight. So, oh, they're in the basket. Okay, and that's okay. We'll grab them.
Mr. Mayor, if I might, based on our conversation in the work meeting regarding public comments, would you like to maybe clarify that for members of the audience tonight?
Would you like to consider moving that back to that item tonight then? Or do you want to?
I guess we'll just see what the comment forms are, but what they might want to talk about, we could explain.
Becky and, okay, they're both regarding item 10 point, oh, that's right out of the gate. It's right up front, 10.1 in the city code. So we did have a discussion prior to this meeting. As we present this, we'll have your public comment now, but if after the presentation, if you have questions or further possible comments, we could open it back up again for clarifying. Just that's kind of what we're going with, so we can have more of a dialogue, and so we have clarifying questions. So Anthony, you're good with that too on this one? So, okay, so we'll just go ahead and do it right now. So we'll first have Becky Johnson.
Okay, my name is Becky Johnson, and I'm speaking for a group, so does that give me a couple extra minutes?
You bet.
Okay, awesome. Well, first of all, I just wanted to thank you guys for what you do. I know it's a thankless job, and I know that what I'm going to talk about is really pretty small compared to the big, giant things. I've been to a few work meetings, and I'm just amazed at how much you guys do, and I really do feel like you care. We've lived here for over 23 years, so we've seen a ton of change, and that's a hard thing to manage. So we do appreciate it, and we do love Harriman and feel like it's a great place, and we feel like the council cares and the mayor cares, which is a big deal, and you just can't please everyone. So we do get that. So I am one of those that has horses. I actually have a dairy cow too that I milk every day, and I know that I'm not alone in Harriman, but it does feel like I'm alone sometimes because Harriman's getting so big and it's not as ag as it used to be, but I love that Harriman does want to hang on to that. So that does make me feel comfortable about living here and staying here. So I do appreciate that about Harriman. And I do love the open space and the trail system, which is something I use with my horses very regularly. So I use the arenas and I use the trails and the hills, and it's really awesome. And I don't mind sharing it at all with hikers and bikers and everybody else. I think it's great that we can have multi-purpose uses. So what I'm here to discuss is it was brought to my attention that in that parks ordinance that there's a leash law. Well, there's already a leash law, but that they're going to define it to add physical leash, which it just didn't have that word physical, and maybe I'm a little off base on that. But And then, so what the struggle is that I have being a horse owner and having dogs is that I love to take my dogs with me on these rides. So I have worked really, really hard over the years to train my dogs to stay with me and never go up to another person or horse. And we're in very small confines on the trails sometimes, and they comply. So, but you can't have a leash when you're riding a horse. And so my desire or concern or idea would be is to try to make it somehow possible to either permit or have something to have a dog off leash. So, and I feel like I'm a pretty realistic person. I know there's hurdles to overcome. I know there's things to consider, but I feel like, and I feel like I'm pretty reasonable, but just to try to see if we can't come to some kind of an agreement and some kind of possibility. Because it feels like there's a lot of laws that come into a place or rules or ordinances, and they're pushed by something, there's some kind of a problem. And sometimes, though, the ordinances are put in place doesn't actually even fix the problem. The problem people or residents are still continue the problem, but it just restricts more of the law-abiding citizens who are trying to be good, who never are seen by animal control or public servants or whatever. And so I want to be a law-abiding citizen. I want to be obedient and have my dogs. And being a law-abiding citizen actually protects me too. So, and I want that. So just to kind of say about the idea is, one of it is that it's about training, dog training, and not about the e-collar. The e-collar is a training aid, it's not a leash. So it's not about like, hey, let's just add that, because I understand it's not a leash. I do use an e-collar as an aid for me if my dogs are off leash, but it is not the main source of control by any means. It is training. And so the idea would be to some kind of a certification, maybe with, there's some ideas about using professional dog trainers that go through some kind of a test about what would be feasible and required, what you would encounter on the trails to make sure and certify your dog is under your control at all times. Even leash dogs get out of people's control, and they're not always trained. I've definitely been on the trails and passed plenty of people that their dogs are tugging and pulling and barking on the end of the leash, and it makes me nervous. So and some people lose control of their dogs on leash. So any dog out of control, whether leashed or not, once they're out of control, they're out of control. So if they're in your hand and on a leash, just because the leash is dragging doesn't make them leashed. They're now out of control. So it would be kind of like, the idea is that you would test, by a professional dog trainer that does it for a living, and that they would certify that under their profession, this dog can obey these things. And we can determine what those are. And then they go to the city with that certification to get the permit. And then they agree, whether it's a signing a waiver or whatever, that their dog is considered as if a leash dog. So if it does something just like a leash dog, they'd be under the same rules and regulations as a leash dog. So if your permitted dog is out of control, you're still under the same obligation. So it really leaves the city with no liability, because it's under the same things. And maybe there's some more things that I don't understand that need to be discussed. But, and then, the benefits, I think, of this is that we have a better relationship with the city and with animal control. There's an option when people want their dogs off leash to have animal control say, hey, you can't have your dog, are you permitted? No, you can't have your dog off leash, but this is what you can do. And then it makes more responsible dog owners and more responsible, people. There's a better relationship for that. Sorry, I know I'm done. Just, is that okay if I take one more second?
You wrap up, you bet.
Okay, so, but it is an opportunity to educate, and people want the opportunity to have off-leash dogs. And the result is you get more responsible and educated dog owners, and you get happy residents. So it's really a win-win even for animal control. I really don't think that permitting maybe a small group, depending on who can pass these certifications, wouldn't be any more risk to animal control. They're going to deal with the same things they deal with. The responsible ones, they're not called on. They're not an issue. So anyway, and it just protects me to be able to be kind of considered a law-abiding citizen. So it does give me protection if that's the case, and that's really what I desire as well. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Becky. Okay, Evelyn?
Okay, so I kind of want to add on what Becky said. I'm here for kind of the same reason. I just wanted to talk about how also I do have a dog who I've trained since he was a puppy. I've worked tirelessly. I've worked many hours with him, ensuring that he can be off leash and not a nuisance to other dogs, other people. I also, like Becky, I do have an e-collar on him to ensure, obviously, I really don't use it because the key is in the training, not the e-collar. So I just wanted to say how I love walking my dog off leash on the trails. I understand like walking him sometimes throughout the city, it's not the greatest, but on trail I feel like it would be okay. I'm always cautious. I ensure that I do have a leash around my neck if someone is uncomfortable. I do have the e-collar around him. I just kind of want to talk about how I've had an experience with animal services. I was at, I think I was at Fort Harriman's Field. It was after hours, no one was there. I had him off leash. We were just throwing the ball, and an animal services truck pulled up behind me, and I don't know her name, that's totally fine, but she kind of laid into me about the leash laws. I had no idea, so I was asking questions to her, and I felt like I was being yelled at and disregarded, which is fine because I totally understand the leash laws, but I just would push with Becky for the opportunity for those trained dogs to have the opportunity to be off leash and have that privilege. So I do understand where you guys are coming from, though. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Evelyn. Any other public comments at this time? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item 6.1.
Mr. Mayor, if I may just make one
Yes.
comment. We can't really get into a discussion about this, but I would say that both of the points that were made by Becky and Evelyn, we've actually discussed and debated those in multiple work meetings. We've talked about the laws, we've talked about liability issues, we talked about different screening programs with certification options, different leash requirements. I'd invite you to go back and look at some of those agendas in the past, and you can see these pretty lengthy discussions and debates about the various topics and some of the constraints that we have on us. I think you'll understand that we did weigh those very, very heavily in coming to the ordinance that we have right now. So,
And when we get to that item, we'll
we
definitely
can
give
probably
you some
talk a little
more
bit more about it, but I
that.
just want you to know, we've heard all of those things and we've talked about them. So we're not taking your recommendations lightly, so.
Okay, city council reports. Jared?
Budget season, if you think that was fun, UFA's equally fun. We had a 3-hour meeting yesterday morning. Working through that budget, we have a board meeting next week. I've communicated a lot of things to you guys recently about the canyon fees, the budget issues. We're expecting an average of 5% increase for wages and benefits primarily. Everything else looks fairly in line. For Harriman, the adjustment we already have, just to remind, and I'll go through this again, but the adjustment for us is that we have first responding stations there's a main one from Riverton, so they respond to first calls in Harriman. They look at that each year, and as Harriman's population has grown and Riverton's has kind of stayed the same in that area, they're responding more and more to our side of the border, which means we reimburse them for that cost. So we have that 5% and then roughly another 2% increase in the number of call volume that we'll be paying for. So an overall about 7% to Harriman, about $300,000 for the year, which is well within what we've budgeted for. There's not a problem with that one to date, but that's pretty much what's going on there. Same sort of process to approve that budget going towards fiscal year July 1st. So I'll give you some more detail on that in this next couple weeks.
Perfect, thank you. Steve?
Nothing.
Okay. Is Sherry with us? Is Sherry online? Okay. Okay, and I really don't have anything other than that banquet I talked about, so.
He's not on the phone from Scotland. Is that only 7 hours ahead?
Is it 7 hours ahead? No, Teddy's probably still up listening. grateful he's not here tonight.
3 in the morning, it's no problem.
Okay, we'll move on to item 8.1, update to Salt Lake County Butterfield Canyon Trail and Trailhead Project. Michael.
Thank you. So I will actually just briefly introduce this. This was presented to the Planning Commission as an update recently, and it was recommended that we also share this with City Council. We have a Salt Lake County Parks, one of their managers, I believe, on the line to be able to present this to you tonight and answer any of your questions on this update. Dustin, are you there?
I am here, yes.
Okay. Yeah, and feel free to begin your presentation, Dustin.
Perfect. All right, well, thank you. Thank you for accommodating a WebEx version of this. I'm actually down in Richfield right now. We're at a Trails Forum, and actually some of your Harriman City folks are down here as well. So it's been fun to interact with some of them. Yeah, just wanted to provide an update. It's been a little bit since we've brought this before the council. I think it was sometime last year, early last year. And a lot's happened since then, and a lot of progress has been made. And so it was requested that we share just an update, help you guys understand where things are at currently. So this first slide demonstrates or shows approximately where the trailhead will be built. And the county acquired the property, I think it was early last year, 2022. And that last bullet point there, based on some greenbelt taxes, we couldn't develop it for a period of time. However, we do have the go-ahead to do that now. And so we are in the process of, well, we've already finished phase 1 trailhead plans, construction documents, and it's out to bid as we speak. In fact, tomorrow the bids will close, and we'll determine, and our fingers are crossed a little bit for our budget. As you guys may or may not know, budgets have been a little crazy the past little while as far as how things are coming in. And so we've tried to be pretty conservative with our estimates and what we can build as part of a phase 1 construction. So fingers crossed for tomorrow, all goes well, and we have a contractor that we can utilize. So we're excited to open those bids. Let me take you through our master plan for the entire site. So this is a 50-acre site, and it's right off of Harriman Highway there. And as it leads into, it has that big curve going to U111, or you can go straight and it takes you up to the Butterfield Canyon Road. So this is the property area that we're talking about, again, 50 acres. And so I'll kind of take you from left to right as I'm seeing it. So ultimately, this will become the trailhead for our trails that we're already building. And maybe I'll give you a quick update on that. We just were able to set 2 bridges as part of our phase 1 trails project. That happened on Monday. It took a lot longer for the bridges to actually be manufactured and finally shipped than originally anticipated. They just shipped a week or 2 ago, and they were ordered, I think, back in either July or August of last year. So it's kind of crazy how long things in certain industries sometimes take. But it was successful. We got 2 bridges in. One was 80 feet long. The other was 50 feet. So everything went well. Contractor did a really nice job with those. We have about 12 miles of trail that have been completed, or mostly completed. And then we have an additional 3 miles of trail that we anticipate building the rest of this, or in the next couple weeks, or 2 months is what we're anticipating. to finalize the 15 miles of trail. And so this trailhead will serve to access this trail network, and we hope to build future trails up further in Butterfield Canyon. That'll be part of a phase 2 or maybe 3 to continue building this trail network out. One nice thing too here is that it connects, this phase 1 actually connects into Yellow Fork Canyon as well. And so there's a connector trail. It's about 3 miles long, and we'll take people back and forth between the canyons. So that's a really nice added trail system and connection. All right, so now I'll talk a little bit about the trail head itself. So again, I'm the western side. My left side is the kind of a smaller parking area. This would be a paved parking area. It would service, obviously, could service parking people there to access the trail network, but there's also a wider, like double track trail that comes off of where that parking lot would be. And so it's a flatter trail that kind of takes you along the creek. And so master plan to have a small restroom there and some ADA parking. It's about 24 or 5 stalls in that section. As we move over a little bit toward the, now going east, you'll see a day use area. So this is actually where we've planned for a larger group or larger amount of parking there. It's about 150 stalls is what we anticipate putting in. The surface will be a roto-milled surface, and this would take care of most of our day use parking is what we're anticipating. This will have kind of a staging area, a plaza area, a restroom. In phase 1, we hope to get it'll be a vault toilet, essentially a 2-seat vault toilet. In a future master plan, we'd love to see a maintenance building out here with the public facing restroom that would be available. So that's would be in a future phase, however. All right, so as we keep going to the east, you'll see kind of in the beige color, this would be for overflow parking. We're not anticipating doing much improvement here. It's currently like a pasture, or that has been used as a pasture in the past, and we would mow this area for any large event parking needed. And collectively, between the whole system, we anticipate closer to 800 parking stalls that could be utilized. But a lot of those, are just for larger events and wouldn't be used on a daily basis. As we continue going to the east, you'll see another road connection off of Harriman Highway. And that one will primarily be focused on equestrian parking. And so you can see kind of in the bottom right there, you'll see some parking stalls for trailers. And I believe there's about 24, 25 additional parking stalls here for trailers and the equestrian riders that would come to the trail system. It's kind of up on a plateau there, fairly flat area up on that bench. Moving further east, this is not part of the phase 1, this additional connection moving to the east that would eventually connect into Harriman Highway. So we hope to have 3 official entrances and exits onto the highway. Just the 2 as part of phase 1 at this point. But as you keep going east, you'll find just some small picnic type trail system where you could take a quick little hike and get up. It's a really beautiful section of the site, primarily untouched, and it's got some rolling hills, and it's really pretty in there. And so it'd be a nice little loop and maybe some picnic opportunities in that area. And then finally, furthest to the east would be a small parking area for people who might use that little loop there. And then as part of this phase of construction too, we anticipate making some final connections from the trailhead into some of our trails that have been built. And so our master plan here is showing those green trails that are indicated are ones that we've already built. The pink are ones that we're going to build as part of our phase 1 trails. And then the purple would be as part of a master plan in a future phase. So I know that's a lot. It's a big site. And we're really excited to be able to provide this great amenity to the county, to Harriman area, and it's going to be an amazing resource up in those hills. So we're really excited about this project. Do you guys have any questions or comments?
Any questions, comments from the council?
Awesome.
We used all our words in the previous meeting. You guys okay with that?
You.
Sure. We've got a new thing. We've got
We
this
look
new-
at each other as that's typically the answer is no, right?
So we're trying to
It's
find
not
this
public
new-
comment.
Well, thank you. My name's Steve Schlesinger. I'm retired since we've been here. I use the trail system extensively. So this is welcome news to me, especially that you're linking it into Yellow Fork Canyon. Is the link there right now to go between the two canyons?
It's partially there. We weren't able to totally build it as part of last year's construction, but we will be completing that section this summer. And there's actually up in Yellow Fork, there's still snow and pretty wet conditions, and so
Yes, there
it's
is.
an unusually
knows.
wet season, as all of us know. So yeah, that part will probably be toward the end of the other trail work that we're doing this summer.
Okay. So the next question I have is who is responsible for this canyon, the trail system? Is it the county or is it Harriman City?
So yeah, so this trailhead is within Harriman City, but the county will be maintaining and operating the trailhead and also the trail systems. We do have agreements with the BLM to be on their land. A lot of the trails go on their land, and then also on Rio Tinto land as well. A vast majority, well, pretty much the entire trail section on this lower portion of Butterfield is on either Rio Tinto or BLM lands. So, but we have agreements with both of those groups, and basically we're going to be maintaining the trails.
Okay, so
Salt Lake County.
the final question I have is, okay, so if the county is maintaining these trails and the county is maintaining the trails in Yellow Fork, when we find issues, like there's a mudslide in Yellow Fork Canyon right now, and I sent an
Yeah.
email in over the weekend, and I haven't heard any response. So who should be the recipient of that information about the trails?
Yeah, good question. So I'm kind of in the planning side of our Parks and Rec project management. The group that will be maintaining it is Salt Lake County Park Operations, and so it would be a call to the Park Operations Center to let them know of any concerns or maintenance issues that you find up there. I do know that just in talking with some of our park operation folks, they have been looking up there and trying to redirect some of the water that's been washing things out. I know they're aware of some of the issues that with this tons of runoff that's caused some quite a bit of damage up there actually in Yellow Fork. So we will have this will be a new change, which is actually going to be a really nice thing for this whole trail system. We will have 2 dedicated full-time staff that will be out not only taking care of Butterfield Canyon, but also into Yellow and Rose Rose Canyons as well. So that's a huge step for us, the county, in dedicating just 2 full-time people to this whole area. And I'm sure as time goes on, there might be some more part-time or other volunteers that they'll help. So there will be on-site presence there after these trails are completed in the trailhead. So
So thank you for your
Thank you,
time.
Steve.
I do appreciate, and Wendy, I appreciate what you do with the Harriman trails. We were on those a lot this past week too. But, okay, but Yellow Fork is a mess. I mean, there's a lot of erosion. Like I said, there's a major mudslide that happened, and I don't know when, but that trail is still eroding where the mudslide occurred. So if you haven't seen it up there, please send somebody up into Yellow Fork to check that out, because there is some erosion underneath it. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you for the presentation.
you're welcome.
Appreciate all your help on
Thanks
this.
for yeah, thanks for being a great partner. And we're really excited to bring this to this corner of the valley. It's going to be awesome.
Okay, we look forward to it. Appreciate your time. Enjoy Richfield.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any more comments, questions on that? Okay, move on to item 9, consent agenda. Look for motion or any comments.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
Okay, motion by
Second.
Steve, second by Jared. Steve?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion carries. Item 10.1, discussion and consideration of an ordinance amending Harriman City Code for parks, trails, open space, and pump tracks. Anthony?
All right, good evening. So just as a little background on this, we first discussed these changes back on November 9th. We had a lot of discussion about the leash law at that point and how we may try and accommodate some of the changes to allow some dogs off leash on trails and in parks. We also, some other major points of discussion pertain to e-bikes and electronic, any motorized vehicles on the trail system. We also talked quite a bit about the hours of operation and some changes that we would like to make there. So we did also bring back and have more discussion on the leash law section of the ordinance update on February 22nd. And that brings us here to tonight, where we'll talk, sounds like a little bit more about that. But just to jump into it, in this first section, we did change, or we added some definitions under the code. All of these items you see here have been added to the code. All of them are, the definitions are directly, are taken directly from state statute. I guess, and the idea there was if anything in state statute changes, which we anticipate that it will, we just reference state statute in our code, and then we'll always be up to date with state statute there. So if you like, I can go through each one of these. We can go through the definitions, or if you're good, we'll just move on to the next item. I've seen some no's, so great.
I think we're good.
Okay, we did also talk about some verbiage in our code that would actually make some of our code less wordy, verbose. And this statement in red is basically the heading statement, everything that follows it. Again, it would just eliminate a lot of wordiness in the code. So we talked about that previously. These are two of the main items that we talked about the first go around when we discussed this. Adjusting the park hours, operating hours from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. That goes for all parks facilities. So our restrooms and whatnot, they would be open from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And then the leash law is mentioned here. From what we had discussed, we ended up just writing it requiring a physical leash, although we omitted the word physical. A leash is required on a dog if you're in any parks, trails, or open space. So any concerns or any discussion we want to have about that right now?
We can discuss that when you're
Okay.
done.
Okay. Continuing on in these general park rules, there were just a couple of additions here where we added no parking or camping after dark, after the park is closed. Posting or sharing of signs and banners, flyers, that sort of stuff would be prohibitive. Private instruction or group classes, those would also be prohibited. And then, just kind of as a catch-all, if there's anything specific that we need to identify or prohibit in a park, we would do so through additional signage at that particular park. And then we get into some of the trails ordinance, stuff that pertains to the trails. Again, we have kind of a heading statement here, basically stating that anything below this is prohibited. This will help reduce wordiness and make things just a little less verbose. There is one item here that we haven't talked about yet, but per Todd's recommendation, we did add this here, and that was keeping the trails open opening the trails at 5:30 a.m., as we do have a lot of early morning trail users. So that is one item that we haven't discussed. If there's any concerns or questions there, we can maybe discuss that now. If not, okay, we'll move on. The items that are crossed out, open flames, dogs being on leash, unauthorized motorized vehicles, that is all redundant, is covered in the previous section, so we're just taking that out to be a little less wordy. Again, with littering and animal waste, again, that's covered in the previous section. This is where we talk about motorized vehicles on the trails and what is allowed and what is prohibited. Basically, we are recommending that we allow only a Class 1 electric e-bike on the trails, prohibiting Class 2 and Class 3 e-bikes. We went over the definitions of those previously. If you'd like, I can go over those again. If not, we will.
No, but I did think of a question going back to the previous slide.
Sure.
If you wouldn't mind. Sorry, whoever's
Go ahead.
driving it. The park times, or previous conversations, there was an issue with if we said it was open at 5:30, do we need to pay people to go out and open those gates?
So,
And the issue with that was some of the trailheads that have gates and things.
so we have.
That's why we stuck with the 7, because there's no way we're gonna pay people to go and unlock a gate at 5:30 and then.
Currently, we have Blackridge, the trailhead at Blackridge Reservoir right now. That's the only one that we have a gate at. Frankly, we haven't been locking that recently. We've just been leaving that open.
This says that they must be. What are you, just kidding.
Well, that
I'm
would be,
giving a hard time. But
we've talked about eliminating that gate there. It would
just-
be closed.
I think the unless
But it's-
indicated otherwise is the catch-all for if the gate is not unlocked.
Right.
okay, well, I just wanna make sure that we're not opening that problem again unintentionally. So I'm fine with that if that wording's all right, and I don't have to worry about.
You're good with that?
Thank you.
Yeah, so the two exceptions on the trails, as far as motorized vehicles go, would be Class 1 e-bikes and then any maintenance-type vehicles or that sort of thing. They would be allowed on the trail system. We jump into the section that talks about what was previously known as the Midas, well, it was Midas Creek Pump Track, never came to fruition. This was, the code was created for the Midas Creek Pump Track, which never came to fruition. So we're just striking Midas Creek and changing this for our current pump track and any future pump tracks that we may install. So anywhere it says Midas Creek, we would strike that. We removed a lot of the definitions that were either redundant or not necessary here, and then basically just changed the definition of a pump track. So just some minor definition changes. Again, more just some additions to the definitions there, to a skateboard, and one small change to the definition of a rider. Again, more small, minor definition changes. We've just strike some of these from the code. So the last one, again, pertains to the Midas Creek Pump Track. Again, it's just eliminating wordiness that is redundant, that's not necessary. Stuff that's covered in the general rules and regulations. So that is all for the changes for that code. So if we want to have any more discussion about any of those items, we're happy to do that right now.
Want me to go?
Do it.
If Sherry was here, she would definitely take the lead on this. As Steve mentioned, we had several meetings regarding the leash requirement. Sherry brought it up, the very first one, that it would potentially be restricting people who have been used to not having one, who have well-trained dogs, et cetera. So we actually tasked staff with looking into a way to do exactly what you suggested. Find some certification that we can have to enforce it. Staff did a really good job trying to find everything, talking to different organizations, and after another meeting, going through all of those things.
We actually had one selected, and
they
that
told us not
organization
to.
wrote us a letter saying, you can't use our.
It was
you
a
can't use
Canine
our-"
Canine Good Citizen
There
Program.
may be others, so kind of what we're going to say is, like, we've gone through it, and at this point, we haven't found a feasible way to do it. We're definitely open to finding a way to do it. This can always be changed and amended, and I think you have willing people to do that if we find a feasible way. But to your point of, there's usually a reason that this is being done. The reason is that largely because of what you described, too many people have moved here, right? We can't do what we used to. I have large dogs, have for 20-some years. Used to be Alaskan Malamutes, now I have a couple rescues. This doesn't apply to them. That's a whole different thing. Love them to death, but man, the training is so much tougher, right? But we used to let them off the leash all the time. Well-trained, same thing, e-collar. Take them, I live over by the cemetery. Take them down there, the grassy part, that's our park basically. I let them run around. They're great. We're fantastic. Any other dog came around though, right back to me, put them on a leash, because the other dogs I can't. Who knows what they're gonna do, right? We'd go hiking up Yellow Fork and nobody around, I let them off, right? But that's a risk to me. Somebody else's dog isn't as well trained. Even if they're on a leash, they're out of control. Sorry, story time, but just anecdotes. The two that I got talked into adopting, fantastic dogs when we're training them, but I use a regular leash and an e-collar, right? Still trying to train them, had them for a year, and they're doing a lot better, but man, I would not trust them. Even if somebody else's dog is well trained, if somehow they pull that leash away from me, your dog's not getting away from them no matter what you do. So I kind of looked at it from both ways. So it's more of a liability thing for us, right? If we've left that liability open, that's an issue for us. So this is us trying to address that liability and it's not about enforcing that rule. You're not going to see an officer on horseback out looking for people who don't have dogs on a physical leash. That's not going to happen. What we need it for is if there is an incident, right, then we have a way to enforce things. And that's not, I think we'll all admit, none of the ordinances or things that we pass are necessarily perfect, and if there's a way to do a certification and have that as a way to satisfy that liability issue and enforcement, we're totally open to it. In this process, we weren't able to find it. As Steve said, several exhaustive conversations. It definitely would invite you to, the audio is available of those meetings, I think even the video. You can ask any of our staff people, please go back and listen to those conversations and contact any of us. You have willing and listening ears. Listen to those conversations, hear those concerns. If there's a way that you think you can help us find a solution for it that allows you to do those things in other people, totally open to it. Is that a
Yeah, I
good
think
summation?
it's hard as a city council person to say, an ordinance isn't lawful or,
Well,
but
it is the law for now, but
Right.
can we change it?
Yeah, I think the way to understand it is that the idea would be if your dogs are well-trained and you trust them and you're willing to take the risk of letting them off a leash, the liability then is yours.
Correct.
If another person on the trail has a dog and they're off the leash and they caused injury to your dogs or to your horse, this ordinance would actually give you recourse against them because they weren't following the law. You could have a civil, situation with there. The problem is that we can't find a way to make any distinguishing factor between the kind of leash, the kind of control, certifying control.
We haven't found a feasible way to do it.
Yeah, can we give somehow endorsement or approval for somebody having those kind of things? It's challenging. There's a lot of
We
back
don't
and
have
forth.
the resources for it. We couldn't find an organization who was willing to basically take the liability for it. If you know of some, tell us later and we'll bring it back. It'll go through the process. Like there's,
I don't know if the mayor's open to it. We could invite one of them.
Yeah.
One of them
gonna
come back
say.
up and make a comment when we get to that point, so.
so I'm.
Becky, we'll have you come back up in a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
And then to go to Evelyn's, just your experience with animal control, I appreciate that feedback. Never had the best experiences in the past until we've taken it in-house. I think it's much, much better. But we need that sort of feedback so we can talk to our people, because whether it's animal control or regular code enforcement or anything, what we always stress is education first. Especially if you have a younger person out there, you need to educate them what the rules are, right? Before we talk down to them and tell them that they're breaking the law, et cetera. So we'll definitely bring that back to them. But I don't know if there's anything that you're going to add, or you want to have Becky
Yeah,
come
I'd
up.
like to have Becky come back up. I think Becky had a few, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Just 4 words, Anthony, SPF 50.
Right?
Yeah, woof.
Hey, thanks so much for letting me discuss this with you a little bit. So there's a couple of things, is that I have been following this, and I think the February 22nd was the one that got away from me, and I can't remember what was going on that night that I couldn't make it. So I was filled in a little bit by Sherry, so it's not like I haven't heard these, or even the arguments about it, or the AKC letter that came back. And the issue that I understand with the AKC letter is that Harriman City was talking about trying to find something to make the e-collar basically a leash. But it's not a leash. So when the AKC came back and said, well, the e-collar's not a leash, they're right, it's not a leash, it's a training aid. So, there's some things that have been discussed, but yet I think that we could further continue down on that, because they're right, the e-collar isn't a leash. And there might not be a program, but every program has to be developed by somebody. So if there isn't a program or certification out there, I'm just wondering, why can't we create one? If this is a small minority of people, money.
We don't have the
Well,
resources.
what I'm talking about is not that kind of resources, because this is a really pretty simple deal, and maybe I'm just not smart enough, but to me, it's pretty simple. There's dog trainers out there who get paid all the time to train dogs. They love training dogs, they love dogs, they want dogs to be the best they can be, right? And they really train owners too, owners and dogs, right? So I'm wondering if any professional dog owners or dog trainers they're going to make some money on this, because they're going to be able to certify they have to pass these things. So like I use the trails a ton, and even the local trails, like by my house, not just up in the hills, but by my house. So there's a path there. So there's scooters and e-bikes, and I've been run up on the back of my horse with e-bikes multiple times, which I get that. So I train them for that. So we're fine and no problem. I live in a community and I want to be a team player in the community, so I'm not going to complain about that. So we have all these things, and so when you're on a trail and I'm riding my horse and there's a asphalt there, my dogs have to be as in control as if they were on a 6-foot lead. So they're trained to heel to my horse's feet, so that they do not even approach another dog or a person, and they don't. I've trained them not to. So it's if they were on a leash. So if you can certify that dogs are trained well enough that no matter the distraction, and you can come up with scenarios that the professional dog trainer, I'm sure, would love to do, I can prove my dog can do this. And all it is saying is that these dogs have passed this rigorous certification, and then you take it to the city, and I don't understand where the liability is, because you're under the same obligation as if my dog were on leash. It's the same thing. So I don't understand where the liability comes from.
Well, I tapped our attorney
Yes.
on the shoulder before this to tell him, you're going to be up on this. I'll take a stab, right, at first. So there's one pivotal word that you used, if. if you can prove that this dog has been certified, that statement right there crosses over into the realm of legal liability.
Right.
So if you can prove it, now what we set out to find is there a nationally recognized program that would meet that definition, right, for that purpose? And the answer we've received so far is no. If it can be created, great. We don't have the resources or
Right.
personnel or anything to create a nationally recognized program. That
If
meets
you're,
the
if you're
legal
looking for nationally, you're right.
the legal definition
Yeah.
for the liability issue. That's
And I understand that, and I understand there could be some issues there, but there's the same thing with the he said, she said, dogs on leash. My dog was on leash, I was holding it, you weren't, and that's that whole thing legally anyway. But I don't understand if it's between the residents where the city comes in, other than if the city says, if somebody says, well, the city gave the permit, so that's where the liability comes in. So if you go, my dog was permitted to be, they passed this requirement, and then somebody wants to go, well, I'm gonna sue the city then too. Is that what you're talking about? So I'll sue the city because you basically allowed this dog to be off leash? Is that kind of the issue?
Right. I think that's like Jared is saying, if we're approving a standard that isn't a nationally recognized standard or anything like that, then in a way, if we permit something to happen and then injury is caused from that, then I think that opens up the city to be sued. We might win that suit and get out, but that's going to cost
Right.
quite a bit of money. I can tell you that we get a lot of frivolous lawsuits, and it does cost a lot of money.
Right.
So
Would there be anything that the permitted person, it's basically like removing the city as liability where you sign that, basically stating you're still under the same obligation as if your dog were on leash or something like that, some legalese stuff for that kind of releases the city of liability? I mean, is there a way, because it just seems like there's got to be a way around this, because it really is, I know it's small population, but that small population is begging for the opportunity.
I think there is some mitigation efforts. I don't know if that takes away the opportunity for someone to sue the city, though.
But I guess there's probably, they could sue the city if there's frivolous, they're going to do it anyway.
Sure.
So that's kind of what I'm saying, does it have to stop at that? And I'm just wondering if there's any way to possibly even just try it, or, because you're right, there is no nationally accredited thing, so if that's a dead issue. There are some nationally accredited, but it doesn't address all the things you'd want on a trail that we're talking about.
Becky,
So-
can I propose something maybe? I'm with blessing of council. I think this is, they're writing on the wall, this is going to pass as it is tonight. Are you okay if, I'm not a dog person, Becky and I have been talking a lot. Are you guys okay if I work with Becky to go meet some of these and we can start just having a conversation? We can move this, and then you and I can, maybe you and I drive this, maybe, I'm committed to you right now to drive this, maybe we go meet with, I know Lobato training. He has a great reputation.
Yeah.
Let's go sit with him.
Yeah.
I need to get my dog in training with him anyways. Let's set something up with him.
I would love that.
As soon as possible. Like I said, I think for liability wise, we need to let this pass, but then
Yes.
I'm committed to you. Let's go have these conversations and see if we can't find a path forward.
Okay, and one more thing, as you said, there's not going to be an officer on the trails hunting you down. That's not true. They drive on the trails. They drive their trucks on all the trails. Not on the hill, but they drive it on, all by my house, they drive on the trails. So,
Chief, do you want to maybe address that point?
again, if they can, but I'm just saying, when somebody says, oh, you're not going to see them on the trails, they do. They're on the trails.
So let me clarify. I didn't say you're not going to see them on a trail. You're not going to see an officer on horseback looking to enforce this.
Okay,
law,
yeah.
right?
No.
We do go up there once in a while, and we'll continue to do that.
Right,
Proactively, like you mentioned, you're not going to see somebody on horseback
right,
riding around looking for something to happen. Now, the interior trails to the city, the urban trails,
yeah,
they do patrol them in their trucks and on four-wheelers and side-by-side.
yeah. Yeah, and we're not against it. I think it's a
That's
great
part of-
idea.
That's part of just policing in general.
No, I think that's great.
Presence and being there, and there are other things that happen on those trails with kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I can't speak for all the council, but I can tell you from my point of view, if we can find a way to do it, I'm supportive of it.
Oh,
We haven't yet been able to make that
Yeah,
happen.
because in my understanding, there's been a couple roadblocks, but I feel like there's still places to go. It's just a matter of how strict, if you're looking for a national accredited, you're right, then it's a dead end. But if you're willing to look past that and see what can we do and then mitigate the liability if that's a major hurdle, I wonder if there's a way, because people do lawsuits all the time even if there is no liability. So, you know, I don't think I can stop that, but that's with anything, so why should this have to stop because of that?
But we want, so, real quickly, and we can move on, I guess. We want to put in place measures that reduce the frequency of those, right?
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
And that's kind of what this is, and like I said right at the beginning, the discussions we've had, I don't know that there's a single member of the council that's been like, nope, we don't want to have any of that. We've spent a lot of time trying, if there's a way to do it.
And that'd be awesome, because there is a lot of
Open to
people
do it.
that I know that have their dogs off leash, and they'd almost just assume just keep doing what they're doing. So it's like, but I know when I've talked to them, they'd love a way to be able to be permitted, and they would spend, hopefully it's not $1 gazillion, but spend some money to get it. You know, and it's like being rewarded for a well-trained dog. So usually though, the calls aren't about our dogs. So, you know, but it just gives us that opportunity. So thank you.
Text me.
Appreciate letting me discuss
And
it.
Becky, text me tomorrow.
Thanks,
So,
guys.
and let's get going on this. Okay, we need to move on this then. Let's look for I'll look for a motion on this.
Your turn.
Motion to approve ordinance number 2023-09, approving various amendments to the Harriman City Code for parks, trails, open space, and pump tracks.
Second.
Motion by Jared, second by Steve. Jared?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, but with the commitment, Becky, that we'll get together and we'll work through this, so. Okay. Move on to item 10.2, discussion and consideration of a request by Harriman City to adopt the 2022 West Traverse Mountain Compatibility Area Study for Camp Williams and Bluffdale as an element of the Harriman City General Plan.
Good evening again, and thank you. So this is one of perhaps several updates that the Planning Department will be bringing to the council in response to the 2023 Utah State Legislature. This project began, I think, in early 2021 when Camp Williams had retained a consultant group called Matrix to essentially update what had been called in the past the Joint Land Use Study, which I know that had been presented to the City Council in the past, or at least previous City Councils. But this is the bill, House Bill 265, called Sentinel Landscape Amendments, and it states that by July 1st, 2025, any communities that have property within 5,000 feet of military land, and in our case, of course, that's Camp Williams, that we must have a compatible use plan. It was indicated in the bill that that compatible use plan would have to be essentially co-authored or at least co-reviewed with a designated party representing the military or the military themselves participating. And then it also states that we have to have a review process when we receive an application for land use within this 5,000-foot buffer area, that we communicate that request to Camp Williams essentially, or their representative, give them an opportunity to review it. They would have 90 days to determine a compatibility. And this is just a review and a recommendation. It's more of an advisory kind of feedback to the city. From their point of view, how do they think that this proposed land use fits within their plan as a military base, trying to preserve their ability to operate Camp Williams. So because the Camp Williams, working with Mountain Land, MAG, the Mountain Land Area Government Association, had retained Matrix to do an updated joint land use study. And that was completed the end of 2022. Our team decided that why don't we just simply take that study and adopt it as an element of our general plan. Now, in reaching out to Matrix, again, the consultant who drafted this plan on behalf of Camp Williams, they had indicated that they were hoping they would get additional funding and perhaps create unique plans for communities that were affected or within that 5,000-foot buffer. But again, that will take time. We have an obligation to have this completed. We felt like this was a very thorough study. Again, this is just all recommendations for implementation. So it's akin, again, to a general plan element of the city. So you can see what that 5,000-foot buffer looks like over our zoning ordinances or our zoning map here in the city. This is the front cover of that plan. We included a link in your packet as far as what that plan looks like. You can tell that this is a military plan in that it has 5 pages of acronyms at the beginning of the plan. It's also pretty thorough. It has, at the conclusion of the plan, it has 84 pages of implementation measures and identifies which parties are responsible for implementing those measures, which are partners, and you see that various cities are identified for each of those implementation measures. A couple of maps that I pulled out from the study just for reference. The initial consideration was essentially looking within 5 miles of Camp Williams property. And again, this is of course not just the base itself, but the land that they use for training, land that they have acquired and preserved for their military operations. This was an image selected from the plan just showing maybe some of the activities that happen on this property. You know, the training, the range area, also where we have ordnance that is still on the mountain. So things that they are trying to protect to make sure that this property is usable for the foreseeable future for the military. Another map that was produced in this study was identifying what are the priorities for potential property acquisition through this ACUB grant program that the federal government has been offering to communities like Harriman, and that, as the council knows, we have tried to take advantage of, and we have been able to acquire and preserve open space to try and create this buffer zone around Camp Williams. But they've identified where they think are the priorities, priority 1, priority 2. They've even got showing some property that was under contract on what they have completed as far as purchases under this program. So the Planning Commission reviewed this on April 19th. We had a public hearing because, again, this is a general plan amendment. We did not receive public comments at that hearing. Planning Commission voted 6-0 to recommend to the council that you would consider approving this document. Now, I picked out just kind of these bullet points in reviewing the study. Not every action item or implementation measure is applicable to Harriman, obviously. I'd like to create like a reader's digest, more of just a user's guide of what works or what's applicable to Harriman City. Also create some maps for reference in working with property owners and future development partners. You know, how does this plan actually impact our community? It's recommended that we specifically adopt an overlay zone, a military compatibility overlay zone. We would have to obviously create what does that zoning tool look like, and that would be, you could imagine, that would largely be consistent with this document, the study, the recommendations that are in the study. But as a general plan element, it's advisory and it guides the work of the Planning Commission and the City Council. In the end, the council is not obligated to adopt any zoning or text amendments or any map amendments. That you can still do things that vary or modify from this general plan. It is just an advisory and informative document. Another thing that is recommended, and this was also recommended in the previous JLU study that was approved in 2012, that the city would agree to appoint a representative of Camp Williams to be an advisory member to the Planning Commission. They would not be voting. How I would anticipate seeing this is that they would be informed, they would be invited to attend, but they would simply be essentially a listening participant and provide feedback on applications that may be or that would be within that 5,000-foot buffer. I honestly have not worked with a city that had this kind of position on the Planning Commission. The nearest that I had was We had one city I worked for, we had a city council member who sat on the planning commission and in a voting role, if you can believe that. It was a little awkward. I had a city council member who voted for something and then on the city council voted against it. Anyway, so I don't know exactly how that works. I don't know, Todd, our city attorney, if you've had any experience with that. But that was a recommendation, and it just felt like the main thing is just trying to be communicative. And I know that Wendy, and I don't know if Nathan, if you were involved in kind of these early conversations of how are we going to communicate development applications within this 5,000-foot buffer area. We've already started having those conversations.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we have that communication. We have a designated liaison.
We do. They do not, they have expressed to me that they are not interested in anything to do with land use as far as the city goes. So having a representative reporting to the planning commission or being, providing information to the planning commission, I don't think they would be open to that.
Well, and that was in the plan. That was just one of the implementation measures.
So, having worked with Matrix on other military bases, because they seem to do most of the JLUSs, I'm not going to say that's a formulaic piece, but I might have read it in others. Typically, if you have something you think is going to impact, you would just reach out to the base, because they don't want to hear about things that are a long ways away, nor are they going to find somebody to come sit here, so.
And I think with this new 5,000-foot buffer, they're going to be involved at some level anyway.
They are, yep. That was just, I just wanted to highlight that that was one of the implementation measures that was recommended. So with that, this is for you tonight for a decision, or if you need more information, of course, you always have the option of tabling and considering this in the future.
Okay. Comments or discussion from council? Pretty straightforward. We've had it in place, just an updated one. So I'll look for a motion then.
Motion to approve, assuming that's not in there, these recommendations?
Correct.
All right. Motion to approve ordinance number 2023-10, adopting the West Traverse Mountain Compatibility Area Study as an element of the general plan.
Second.
By Jared, second by Steve. Jared?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Sherry, you comfortable voting?
Yeah, I listened,
Okay.
yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. That motion carries. Okay, thank you, Michael. 10.3, discussion and consideration of a request by John Lindsley to amend the official Harriman City zoning map for 545 acres located generally at 4461 West Juniper Crest Road and 15750 South Mountain View Corridor Highway in the FR 2.5 Forest Recreation Zone to apply for the LPMPC zone.
So we're going to make one presentation. Both projects, both halves of these requests are very similar. Planning Commission heard both of these at once, but it does require separate motions for your consideration tonight. Also, Reed Dixon, the civil engineer and consultant on this project, is here tonight and is prepared to answer your questions and make a few comments on their presentation or their proposal to the city. So again, just the general area of the property in question. This is, as stated, this is essentially a rezone that has a master development agreement component. Laguna and Malibu, the two halves of this project. Together, the development team had started at the end of this process, starting to call it the preserve. So if you see that term in your documentation, that's how that is forming. You have two halves, but all together combined, it's the Harriman Preserve, 815 total acres, and just over 1,200 dwelling units are being proposed. Like our other master development agreements, there's always an element of design guidelines that includes site design, architectural design, and landscaping. Amenities, both public and private. One of the main features or proponent kind of elements of this project is access to our foothills, access to more trails, more connections, more trailhead opportunities in connection with the development of the property for largely residential uses. This we have to look at these four standards of review that are outlined in the city code. You have the general plan, whether or not the proposal is in harmony with the character of existing development, what adverse effects may have on adjacent property, and also do we have adequate facilities and services that are able to serve this property. So this Planning Commission, with advice of the staff, reviewed this. It was our determination that the 2025 general plan, which was the plan at the time that this was applied for, that the proposal does not comply with that general plan. Essentially, it's an increase in density. And we also did identify in that previous plan this military compatibility overlay in the general plan. Again, it didn't become a zoning overlay, but the general plan did talk about that. You can see in that 2025 plan, you can see again this green hatched area, that's the military compatible overlay, and you can see that part of Laguna and Malibu encroaches on that. We also looked at the new general plan, really more for point of reference. It is not the advisory document for this project, but it also did not comply with the new general plan. We looked at whether or not it was in harmony with existing development. The area does have a hillside overlay zone, and the existing development really is anticipating, again, very low density. And it was our recommendation to the Planning Commission that the increase in dwelling units does not preserve the hillside overall. We also looked at the impact on adjacent properties, and chiefly that's Camp Williams. We did not see how that was a compatible use, that it had detrimental impacts on Camp Williams. And so we recommended that that was not compatible and had impacts both ways. We also looked at the facilities plan, and this really was probably the key issue where we just could not work through our differences. There were a number of staff meetings and some interim meetings, I believe, with council members and our management team. We were requesting, what is the financial impact of this proposal to the city? What's it going to cost us? What revenues would be generated? And we just never came to a point where we had some financial impact document that we could really analyze and determine what's the bottom line for the city. But in general, everything that we identified with the information that we had received was that we felt like it had a significant increased financial burden to the city, and that we were not able to adequately provide the services that would be required to support this development. Again, we never received a full financial impact report, but we're just basing that off of what information we have received and also the advice that we were getting from key departments in the city. So the Planning Commission heard this again on April 19th. We did receive some public comments. We included those in your packet. Commission voted 5-1 to recommend denial to the City Council. And I apologize, this is misleading. Again, we presented both of these to the council, but we had two different motions. The first one was a 5-1 recommendation on Laguna to deny. The second motion was 6-0, and this is what was stated in your packet, 6-0 to deny Malibu. So they both had negative recommendations from the Planning Commission with the stated findings that you see here that are summarized on your slides. Any questions before you hear from or ask questions of the applicant? Okay.
Nope.
All right. And then I don't believe Reed has a different presentation, but you're welcome to use these slides if necessary for reference.
Hi, Reed Dixon, representing the owners of the project. We've talked a lot about this for a very long time, so I won't be very redundant. I'll be a little bit just to make sure we are clear. But we've had a long, long history. I think we started talking about this about 3 years ago. And I've been in this room when many of you have used the exact question, what do we get, when they're looking at a proposal for a project, especially if it's a PUD or some kind of negotiated application. Not so much with a conventional, because that's kind of cut and dry, but with this project, we made way, way, way more effort than any other project I've worked on to make sure that the city was going to actually get what they should get in terms of amenities and design quality and so on. I've been involved with this for a long time. This project was, or this property was annexed back in 2007, in the fall of 2007, along with thousands of other acres in what you might refer to as South Harriman. When it was brought into the city, it was done so not with the intention that it would become open space or that it would become a recreational area for the public or for anybody. It was brought in with thousands of other acres with the understanding that it was going to be developed actually with densities of up to 4.5 units per acre. Properties that had specific plans at the time were assigned certain types of zones and are currently being developed approaching that density, but I don't think any of them have actually gotten to those densities just because of land constraints and topography and so on. The zone that was assigned to this property and others that weren't planned out yet were considered holding zones. There's been some discussion back and forth on whether or not that really was intended to be a holding zone. And if you actually listen to the city council meetings, that's the terminology that was used, that it would be either an agricultural zone or a forestry recreation zone that would be considered a holding zone until such time as detailed plans were brought forward. Then jumping forward quite a few years, the LMPC ordinance was adopted, and that's fairly recent that Chapter 33 was adopted by the city. And the reason it was adopted was, and if you'll indulge me for a second, the city council finds that standard zoning practices such as single-purpose base zones, planned unit developments, or other types of zoning, normal zoning classifications are inadequate to address the development of larger parcels of property in the city. To ensure that these developments are well-planned, sensitive to the needs of the city, and also successful in recognizing the rights of property owners to develop their land. So that is the introduction to the LMPC ordinance that you adopted fairly recently. And I also stood right here when that ordinance was adopted and we changed the language to include properties that had at least 200 acres. And it was specifically discussed that there were only maybe 4 of those in the whole city. And 2 of them are Malibu and Laguna, and there's a couple others. There might be 1 other 5, but I think there's only 4. And so specifically, the large project master plan community ordinance was adopted not as a guarantee to applicants like ourselves, but as a start to how large properties that are contiguous could be master planned the right way and not just the conventional way. So we went down that road and spent lots of time, lots of effort, lots of money with all of you, most of you, and provided lots and lots of detail. At the pinnacle of that, it might have been last summer, there was one particular meeting after all of these work sessions where we walked out of that meeting and the conclusion statement was, I didn't see anything in this whole presentation that I did not like. That's where we were in the summer last year. Then the demeanor of the city changed a bit. And so before going there, I wanted to emphasize that the LMPC ordinance is what's being applied for and discussed right here now today. It's can the property be considered in the LMPC zone? Because then the ordinance itself even says that you really don't even have anything. It just basically opens the door to a discussion. It doesn't approve or entitle anybody to anything. It basically just opens the door to a discussion, to finalizing the things that are in the staff report for reasons to deny this application. It would be somewhat of a bad business decision to spend $1 million proving up on all this only to get denied. So it's a little bit impossible, frankly, to answer every single cross T, dot I on a project like this, every single dollar, every single infrastructure, every single everything, without having it would be impossible to do that without knowing that we at least had the option of doing an LMPC process. So this is not entitling the applicant to anything. It's only basically saying we can now proceed to discuss and finalize agreements. If we never finalize, then there is no obligation on either side. So that's what the LMPC says. It doesn't say you get something, it says you can start something. So that's what we're really trying to do. And if we know that there's good faith there, then we do spend that $1 million to prove up on every single item that could ever concern. And we might end up with a book that's an inch or two thick that documents, so that you're not just believing what we say or trying to remember what was agreed to, but it proves up with every figure and every table and every paragraph and every value, so that if we're all replaced or gone, that someone else picks up that document and moves forward with a solid plan. That was the intent. That's what we're trying to do. So these items in the staff report I wanted to address real quick, because we worked so hard to come together, but we seem to be so far apart, and it's kind of hard. But is it harmonious with the overall character of existing developments in the vicinity of the subject project property? Is it harmonious? That's a strong word, like beautiful music. But we made every effort to preserve open space, for example. Our plan shows over 60% of the overall property not even being touched. So not masqueraded and then retained and brought back and reclaimed, not even being touched in the first place. So there'd be excellent wildlife habitat, there'd be excellent areas for trails, there'd be excellent areas for recreating, there'd be excellent preservation just for the aesthetic of it. It says that the city intends to preserve as much of the existing natural beauty as is feasible and still allow for compatible development. The natural resources should be taken advantage of without significantly detracting from the enjoyment of the hillside area. So that comes from the hillside zone. And so we talked about the hillside zone extensively. Our roads, our lot layouts, our development, our disturbance areas avoided 30% slope areas. In some cases, roads got into more than 30, but that's allowed up to 50 in the ordinance. So we demonstrated how what we were doing was actually superior to what the current ordinance allows or demands. We feel like we would preserve an immense amount of open space and character up there compared to what a conventional plan might do or what some other alternative might end up doing. So what does the city get? I think the city should think about that. They could get, with this proposal, pretty much everything you want. We haven't said no to anything that the city has proposed or requested. If they asked for a grandiose 50,000 square foot pink casino, we'd say no. That's a bad idea. But if they ask for a place to do tubing or a place to do shooting or a place to do large 4th of July activities on a big park area, an amphitheater, whatever, yes. A reception center, public works facilities, potentially an indoor shooting range for training by police and others. We discussed all of these things and we were open, parks, trails, trailheads, all of these things. Adjacent property, Camp Williams. So we had extensive meetings with Camp Williams. This is a summary of many meetings that we had. And in here, we basically came to a verbal conclusion. And again, please indulge me. There were 8 items that we talked about specifically. We agreed to lower residential housing densities in the affected areas near Camp Williams to reduce the number of affected residents. We agreed to cluster units elsewhere that don't need sound mitigation. We agreed to utilize specifically written and strongly worded acknowledgments and disclosures in all closing documents on plats, et cetera, so that anybody coming in would be fully notified and fully cognizant and aware and legally obligated to live next door to Camp Williams without complaint. Employ architectural designs and specific building materials to absorb or deflect sound, most specifically wall, window materials that would border and face the camp. Set off or stagger houses around the southern perimeter to mitigate sound and screen the more interior units. Provide berms and vegetative screening between affected houses and the camp. Provide buffers, access, hydrants for fire safety. Buffer and access areas that will serve recreational purposes for trails, open spaces, and access by firefighting apparatus. Provide fire hydrants and water for firefighting. Make it safer than it is now. Communications, yearly outreach by camp to all affected homeowners to explain camp practices, operations, and schedules for exercises. Provide reminder notices each time training drills are to be held. We went on and on and on, and only to find out that the camp and the people we'd been working with were asked to stop communications and that we were to communicate differently. And that this was not what that they were amenable to these mitigation measures, all the way up to the generals visited these ideas and were ready to go on this. But then it got reversed. The fourth thing was the adequacy of facilities, primarily infrastructure and the cost of infrastructure. The city right now is entertaining PIDs. They're looking at other large projects in the area of this project. And there are mechanisms, there are PIDs, service districts, ways of doing this where the city is not obligated. Because in this staff report, it says, it is reasonable to assume that the obligation to provide long-term municipal services for the proposed development will fall to the city. And I 100% disagree with that assumption. I think there's a lot to be found out, and there's a lot to be calculated and shown to you exactly how that'll work. And on these other projects that I referred to, that's what you're going through in multiple meetings with a lot of people to make sure all the dollars and cents work and fit. We would do the same thing. And so it says it's difficult and costly for the city to serve and maintain with life safety and fire protection. It would be expensive for the city to provide and maintain. We said over and over that the project would be self-sustaining financially. That's our promise, that's our commitment, that's what we need to show, and that's what we will do, or we won't have a project. If the city's concerned about that, we promise to prove up on that and show that it would not be a city burden, period. So we're trying to knock these down where the compatibility with Camp Williams, the hillside protection, environmental issues, the Camp Williams complaint, all of these things. We've had traffic study done. We had a draft MDA drawn up. It showed how even the large lots would have graduated and tiered landscaping and water preservation methods for home sites, reflectivity, ridgeline, all of these things would be dealt with in an MDA to your satisfaction. That's where we're headed. That's my redundant presentation because we've talked about it so much. But what does the city get? You know, I recently had a conversation with some of your staff on another project that was previously applied for as a PUD right here. And it had a few more lots. I forget how many, 12, 8, 10, 12, I forget how many, but it had more lots. And it had about $1.5 million of amenity in it. Landscaping, nice, beautiful, parks, trails, trailhead, beautification of existing blighted areas, all kinds of things. And the response was, as we now are applying for a conventional plan because we were denied on the other, that was a missed opportunity. That was the conversation I had. That was a missed opportunity. What do we get? Well, nothing on this other project that went from PUD to conventional. Unless all you want are plain Jane larger lots and right-of-way. And we're happy to do that. It's a good Plan B. Plan A was better, but Plan B is acceptable. We're happy to do it. And on this project, same thing. We're happy to do it. Plan B is still acceptable to us. But what do we get? Pretty much nothing but beyond the conventional. And it's disappointing as a designer. I kind of take personal pride in what we do. It's disappointing because we want to do this LMPC thing that you guys even have in your introduction so that we can do unique and creative things, the best things. But I feel like it's slipped away or slipping away. And we'd rather that not. We'd rather have a rezone to LMPC and then discuss every detail and document it and be legally committed to provide it. So that's my thing. If there's any questions, let me know.
Any questions for the
Thank you.
applicant at this point? Okay, thank you, Reed. Okay, discussion amongst the council.
I have one question. Well, it's kind of two parts. So number one is, in the past when we have talked about LMPC zoning changes, we've also done that in conjunction with an MDA. We haven't approved one and then waited and approved another one. It's usually kind of an all-in-one thing. In this case, doing it in steps, I wouldn't want to change, at least for me, I'm not interested in, I don't want to necessarily say no to never making a change to the zoning if it was appropriate and we had an agreement in place. However, doing it now and changing the zoning on all of that acreage without the plan fully in place seems premature to me. So I asked the question, if we were to deny the zoning request this evening, how does that affect their ability to reapply or ask for that change again should there be an MDA that was acceptable?
So typically, it's 1 year before the same application can be considered. However, if there are significant changes to a proposal, essentially it's a new proposal. It might cover the same ground, but it's a different proposal. That can be reconsidered within, before that expiration of 1 year. As you know, there is a draft MDA that was attached to the documents that you received. It's a requirement of the submittal for the large project master plan community. The process that's outlined in that code does say essentially that we are to treat it as if it's a zoning amendment. That's the process that we're going through. And the applicant is correct. It is an iterative process, but you look at the development agreement and it does say certain rights are vested. And if we deny a future application as the project matures, it's subject to arbitration. I mean, there are things that are essentially protected for both parties, right? I mean, it is clear that the LPMPC zoning tool does say what the applicant had stated, that there are, the language is a little bit confusing because it does say this is an iterative process and there's no actual development approval at this stage. But the MDA does say that there is a maximum number of units and there are those typical protections that we can't just deny an application just because we don't like it. We are starting to set the standards of review for future requests. It does have essentially what we consider to be entitlements associated with it. Now, as these conversations, these discussions began to slow or maybe not resolve the questions that we were identifying as a city, the applicant was aware that we had maybe not a fully matured proposal, but it was their request that they move forward. They are the ones who had requested that we have a planning commission public hearing, that we have a recommendation, and we bring it to the council. So that may be why some of these issues might feel a little unfinished or untidy, but that's why.
I don't really have any questions. I'll just make one comment. And that is that, as far as I can tell from the last time this was before us in this forum, nothing has fundamentally changed. Between then and now, the issues that at least I personally raised that I was mainly concerned about, I had many conversations with the applicant and experts that they brought in and tried to find ways that would mitigate those things and didn't find any feasible or even viable way to do it. And since then, I haven't seen any fundamental changes to the plan. So rather than rehash everything that we went through in this meeting nearly a year ago in the summer, I really don't have anything new to add. I have the same concerns, the same objections to moving forward until those things can be addressed adequately. So that's kind of just where I'm at on this. I don't want to rehash it all. If you want to hear my comments, go back and listen to those. I exhaustively described them all. I don't want to go through it all again.
I would say the same thing. I don't, I think it's easy to say that it's just simply opening the door for an opportunity, but there is entitlements that come with it, which I'm not at all comfortable with for all the reasons that have been discussed in the past.
Anything to add, Steve? If not, I'm happy to go too.
I just make, there were a lot of elements of the design elements of the properties, of you know, their aspirational hopes for the kind of development it would be, that were incredibly appealing. I think their intentions of the quality and type and kind of development they have in mind is just really high-end, very, very attractive, you know, high-end luxury, beautiful kind of development. And I think that approach and having a that type of vision and view up there is laudable. And I appreciate the efforts to do that. I thought there was so many elements that were really great. But like was said, along with those elements came some concerns regarding density, compatibility. Primarily, I think the one that remains for me is the ability to service that. Because the assertions made, at least up to this point, suggested that they weren't long-term sustainable solutions and that would fall on the city. And the lack of a firm understanding of that or a robust legal basis on that, it's just a risk that as a city we can't take on, and the hope that works out. So I know there's assertions that they would prove that out and do that, and I would say I'm open to seeing that happen, but I'm not necessarily interested in granting entitlements prior to seeing all of that resolved, right? So, like you said, I think we've had that conversation ad nauseum, so, but that's my comments for this evening, so.
I'll just piggyback onto what Steve said a little bit too, is that we've had great projects by this particular developer in our city, and we appreciate those. And so I don't doubt at all that the quality would be there. It's just satisfying those concerns as far as being able to pay for it.
Yeah, and that's why I asked the question is I don't want to jam them up. You know what I mean? If they still want to make progress and still want to work on those things, I want to provide the opportunity to leave that door open. And so I didn't want to necessarily deny something that would be better tabled or something like that, but seems like they're pushing for an answer, and should they make adjustments, they could bring it back and reapply without that year waiting. So that kind of resolved my concern there. So.
One final comment, if I may, and then I'll make a motion if that's okay. I don't want to sound overly negative, Reed. I mean, it's been a long conversation. I really like John and his team, and I've spent a ton of time with him trying to figure out ways past some of, at least my personal concerns and some of the councils. So it's not been, I don't want to sound overly negative, right? There are a lot of positive things, but we just couldn't get over those hurdles that have been mentioned. So that's what the process is for, to try to find a way to make things work, and everybody's worked hard, our staff and your staff. But we're at a point where we're close, but like you said, but we're still pretty far apart. So I think we need to move on with the process and revisit it again later.
I just want to add a couple of points. Maybe it's my turn to be bombastic.
Yeah,
Is that the word? I'm not going to be bombastic. For me, I'm going to go back through the points made too. I go back to our general plan. We just approved, and I know we're referring to an older general plan, but even we just as a council just updated our general plan with an FR 2.5 zone of 1 unit for every 2.5. We just reaffirmed that in our last general plan decision. This does not fit that. I think that for me, if I envision development up there, it's large lots on just it's cabins. That's just, to me, I don't want to, there's property rights associated with that for sure to develop, but we just reaffirmed, if we were to approve something like this, we're already going against our general plan that we just approved, right? Cost of the city, like we're talking, we can't even put a price tag on what it's going to cost to police that, to service that.
Why can't?
Mainly because it's going to be millions of dollars, and there's not a tool. Everybody that's come in has said there's not a tool to do that. Everybody associated with Suncrest over in Draper said, that's making that same mistake. We'd be going down the same path, and they regret that path at over at Suncrest. It's just cost that city to this day millions and millions of extra dollars to the taxpayers. Proximity to the base. Reed, I will take issue. I do not love that you're attacking our staff. Our staff has never reached out to Camp Williams to tell them to cease conversation. That has never happened, nor would it happen. We have a very good relationship with the base. I will say from day one when this was proposed, there was no positive feedback from them, none, from day one. So the fact that I do take issue that you've come after our staff, who try to work they're straightforward, they're honest, they would never get in the way of something like this, so I do take issue to that, but I'll leave it at that. So at this point, I'll look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to deny a request to amend the zoning map for proposed Laguna Master Plan community.
Motion by Jared.
Second.
Second by Sherry. Steve?
So do we vote affirmative for the denial?
Yes.
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion carries 4-0. 10-4, Michael. Discussion, consideration, request by John Lindsley to amend official Harriman City zoning for 270 acres located at 4461 West Juniper Crest Road and 15750 South Mountain View Corridor for LP MPC zone.
Mayor, just as a matter of procedure, as you know, I've already essentially presented on both applications, but the applicant should have the opportunity to address you again on the separate application if you wish. Mayor?
Sure. Yep.
Okay.
I've worked in the city for a long time, and I plan on working here a long time more. So I don't want the word attack to be in there. Let's call it a constructive criticism, maybe. We had many meetings in good faith with the base, and they communicated things to us. And there was an abrupt reversal. So I don't know what caused the abrupt reversal. So that's where we are. Another part of this LMPC application was that staff told us that they were requested to no longer spend time on the LMPC application that we had open. So we didn't necessarily choose to bring it to Planning Commission and City Council right where it was. We were still trying to work through and have even weekly meetings. But staff told us, sorry, we've been directed to not spend more time on this application. So we were kind of like, wow, okay, well, I guess the only thing we can do is go to a vote right where we are. So, I just wanted to clarify that. Staff does a great job. I think they want to do what the city council wants them to do. They work well with us, not attacking anybody. But it's been a frustration. This property is owned by two separate families, Malibu one family, Laguna another family. And you never get to talk with them. They're kind of buffered by us. But this is basically their life. This is basically all they have. This is basically their retirement, their family asset. It's all they have. And I bring that up because I just want the city council to think, you know, what your estate is like and what your assets are like and what your personal things are like. And this really affects people and families. And we respect what Camp Williams is doing. They have a mission. I'm the most patriotic guy you've ever met. So that's not an issue. But I'm also interested in these families and their rights to utilize their property. So that's the position we're in, is compatibility and buffering and land use quality that makes the landowners, the camp, and the city all happy. So that's where we're trying to go. And we'll be here again because we have other applications coming in. And LMPC was Plan A. Plan B will still be acceptable to us. So thank you.
Thanks, Reed.
I don't think it's necessarily a binary choice between saying that you like some of the things they're doing and it's not compatible. I think both of those things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't assume to speak for Camp Williams or what their thinking might have been or what changed or if it changed or what happened there, but I think that they've you know, in writing and verbally expressed that they don't desire to have houses right up against where they're shooting off, you know, the big, the big cannons, you know.
I think you're absolutely correct. We just couldn't figure out how to achieve the good things while ensuring that we did not produce harm.
Right.
We could not get past that.
I do know that even through all the good intentions of putting it on somebody's deed documents, it definitely does not mean they will not complain. Unfortunately.
Okay, look for a motion then.
Done 3 in a row.
Motion to deny the request to amend the zoning map for the proposed Malibu master planned community.
Second.
Motion by Steve, second by Jared. Jared?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, that motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Reed.
Thanks, Reed. Tell John thank you as well.
10.5, pending ordinance for cable, telecommunications, and broadband services in Harriman City. Todd?
I'll just stay right here. Make it easy. As you know, the city has a right to regulate its public right-of-way. However, there are certain state and federal laws that limit the city's ability to restrict certain types of providers in the right-of-way, specifically cable, telecom, and broadband. What makes it complicated is that there's various federal laws that apply differently to each of them, like the Cable Act of 1922 has certain restrictions and limitations in that act. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 also has different prohibitions than the Cable Act, but it's very specific to telecommunications. And broadband, there's no federal law on it. There's no state law on it. also makes this complicated is when a provider is offering multiple services, such as telecommunications and broadband, and how to, what laws apply to it. So we put forward this notice of pending ordinance to allow the city to navigate through these very complex laws, and also to make sure that our code is compliant with those laws. I noticed in just skimming through it, there were a couple areas that I don't think are compliant with federal laws. So this will give us time, at maximum 180 days, to look at the issue. We can always propose something quicker, which we plan on doing, so I don't anticipate it taking 6 months. But we just want to make sure that the city's being protected, that we are can navigate these different providers appropriately. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
So what about people who have already applied?
So if they have a valid franchise agreement, then they would be able to operate under that franchise agreement. If they breach that franchise agreement in any way, then we can look into the issue. We don't anticipate doing that, but that certainly could be an option.
So if we received a request for a franchise agreement, we don't have to grant it, is that?
Well, if it's already came in before this, we do, right? It goes on, is it grandfathered in before that?
I think any that are currently signed, yes. I don't know. I think the intent of this is to pause so we can make sure that these
That has to
agreements
come
we
to
have
us
actually
For
cover.
a vote to approve a franchise agreement, that's a legislative thing, is that?
Yeah. So this isn't clearly a land use item. This is management of the city's right-of-way. So I don't think the vesting laws apply as far as submitting an application, and once that application's submitted and it's deemed complete, then they are vested at that time. So I would argue that any potential applications that come in now or that have not been signed would not be signed until we can figure this out.
But any that have already been signed?
Yeah.
Okay. Those are my only questions. What about-
If somebody's already been, if one's already been signed, and it comes to find out that the ordinance under which it was signed is not compliant with federal law, how does that impact those agreements? Would they have to be amended?
We do have exceptions in our franchise agreements stating that if there's any conflict of laws, specifically with federal law, the federal law would apply.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you want a motion?
Yep.
Oh, I got some new language here. I got it. Sorry, it was, Jackie gave it to me, so. Motion to approve resolution number R28-2023, giving a notice of a pending ordinance for potential changes to regulations related to cable, telecommunications, and broadband services.
Motion by Steve, second by Sherry. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That motion carries.
You're welcome.
Future events, meetings, next Planning Commission meeting next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Next City Council meeting, May 24th at 7 o'clock. This weekend, there is the Health and Safety Palooza. This kind of brings our bicycle event combined with our Health and Safety Fair all together under one event this year. So that is this Saturday from 9 to 12 out front here at Jalen Crane Park, 9 to noon. So tons of stuff going on. I'm excited, a lot of stuff, new and improved. But it's going to be exciting. I will say also next Thursday on the 18th, we're holding our first Latino town hall. Can I talk in Spanish for a minute for anybody that might be listening? El próximo jueves, el 18, a las 6:30 de la noche, vamos a tener la primera town hall de Harriman, de la ciudad de Harriman. Está enfocado a los latinos en la comunidad. Estamos creciendo en esta comunidad, entonces todos están invitados. La mayoría va a pasar en español. Vamos a hablar Fortunadamente yo hablo español y más o menos hablo español. ¿No, Antonio? Pero queremos aprovechar esta oportunidad de invitar a todos los latinos en la comunidad a venir aquí a City Hall y vamos a tener representantes de la ciudad, de la policía, de otras organizaciones a hablar y invitarles a estar involucrados en la ciudad. Entonces, el próximo jueves a las 6:30 de la noche. Thank you.
And some of the city council will be there too.
And I said that. Yes, I said that. So, yes, Town Hall next week, Thursday at 6:30. I'm so excited. This is a new thing. Already heard numbers today of over 150 people planning on this event, so it's going to be awesome. So, that being said, I'll look for a motion to go back to work meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.